So my name's Jason Nash. I have worked for most of the last 25 years in a range of businesses. But I think primarily I've been involved in what you would think of as digital transformation or digital product management, working in many different organizations over that time. So a pretty varied career. And then at the end of that process, decided to set up my own consulting organization, which I called Curious Cognition, because I'm a very curious person. And I've been doing that for most of the last sort of 18 months or so, working with a range of different companies, but primarily travel businesses, helping them really either get their strategy in order or getting their growth programs or their digital products pulled together. And that's really what I've been doing in the last few years. You know, I've had a pretty varied career and I've worked in a lot of different industries. And I always think that, you know, your ability to add value in an organization is as much about the diversity of the background you've had as it is about the deep skill set that you've developed. And I guess that I've always been aware that my brain is wired up a little different from the average person. I'm dyslexic, and I know that that can be a limitation at times. I've had numerous amusing spelling mistakes in my career, which we won't go into in this conversation. But I always knew that I was wired up a little bit differently, and I've always described it as being a horizontal thinker. I'm very good at seeing patterns and connecting things up that maybe other people don't necessarily see, or that they may see, but they might not see the ongoing ramifications for where that might lead to. And so having gone through the GC index and being classified as a strategic game changer, with the strategy element being my leading score and the game changer being my second score, it was actually really useful for me to actually be able to label, if you like, some of the way that I think about things and the way that I approach things. I also had a pretty high score in the implementer piece, which also sort of demonstrated why I like to actually roll my sleeves up and get the first version of something delivered and actually, you know, help brainstorm the process that you might want to work on to actually get something working. And then once that first version is done, I guess I'm happy to hand it off and work with people and bring people into the teams I've worked with to really kind of go and then drive, you know, the initiative forwards from that point forwards. But I think, you know, that ability to be able to, and some people call it big picture, and, you know, there's lots of different labels out there in the world for this. But I think, you know, it's fair to say that I've found in my working career at times, it can be a curse as well as being a blessing, because, you know, you can be in a room talking about concepts and ideas which to you seem very, very obvious, but to maybe other people in the room, it seems a bit pie in the sky or a bit out of there. I'll give an example maybe if I could, because I think it might be useful. You know, you think about the impact of driverless cars on society and how that's going to impact the world. And so obviously that's going to impact the car drivers in the world and people that drive for a living. But then it also has the knock-on effect of, you know, well, that's going to probably also affect people that buy cars. So the servicing industry is going to be affected. The insurance industry is going to be affected. Car parks are going to be affected. You know, so all of these other industries suddenly start to have these knock-on effects that when you think about it, it has this huge impact outside of what initially felt like a pretty small part of something that you were working on. And I guess, you know, in the automotive products I've built in the past, when I worked in, you know, the video industry, I've always looked for those kind of knock-on effects from a product or a service doing something, and how that then will impact other elements within either that company's portfolio of products or, you know, broadly in society in the way it works. So I think, you know, it's an interesting way that I see the world, and it's great personally for me now being able to understand a little bit more about that and have labels to use when I'm talking to people about the concepts and the ideas. The interesting thing is that the true game changers out there are, you know, very obsessive in the way they approach the world, and they, you know, they don't have any time for sort of getting the work delivered, if you like. And so those people who are the true great game changers out there can also be, you know, seen as a little almost on the autistic scale because they're so obsessed, right? And you know, I have my partner is on that scale as well, and I know that that can be a blessing and a curse because it means you can be super focused on getting something done. In my own case, you know, that idea of mapping the future, which the strategist is all about, I'm very much about painting that big picture and getting everybody on that journey. And I recognize the power of words and communication. You know, if you don't have your team on board with you, it's very hard to get people to move forwards and to really drive the agenda that you want. But I'm not a playmaker. I'm not that super orchestrating person that sits in the middle and joins everybody up. You know, having somebody like that on the team working with you is super valuable because they're always going to pull all those strands together to make everybody work in that very sort of cohesive and really effective way of working. What I do have, you know, a slightly higher skill on is on that implementing side, though. So, you know, not super high, but enough to want to actually get the processes in place and get things working. And you talk specifically about the processes there. I feel that in my working life, and I was exposed to agile thinking and processes pretty early on because of my engagement in the automotive space. So where a lot of people have sort of come into agile product management and agile thinking through things like Scaled Agile Framework, I had a lot of exposure to it early on through the automotive industry, which of course Toyota is where it originally came from. So I've been a big fan of agile skills, agile approaches, you know, things like business model canvases as a very quick way of being able to draw up something that historically would have been written out at length by those more sort of, you know, implementing procedural type, the polisher type people. And the reason for that as well is my dyslexia. You know, if you're dyslexic, you don't want to write lots of prose because you know it's going to be error prone, and I tend to be very verbose when I write, as odd as that might sound. So I've tended to look for those kind of techniques and tools that have helped me be able to tell that story, paint that picture, get people on the same page with as few words as possible. And I think frameworks like the business model canvas and the value prop canvas, you know, techniques like Scaled Agile Framework or just agile in principle, whether that's Scrum or Scrum, whether that's Scrum even, or you know, some of the other techniques, that can be a really useful way of being able to sort of get people moving, getting the momentum going to get things all focused on the outcome, which I think is super important for new ideas as much as it is about existing work that needs to get done and delivered. I think you can have moments in your working life where, you know, you can be in the right place at the right time doing the right work, and then because of changes in the environment or people, you know, things can go, you know, in different places. So I think there's been moments in my career where things have all been lined up and working really, really well. When I worked at Powerway in Indianapolis, working for the automotive supply chain company, We did some really interesting work there, and really was sort of thinking outside of the box on that particular product set. And I think, that sort of game-changing, painting the vision of the future, where we worked with Chrysler and secured $25 million of investments through that, and then scaled up the business from, tens of people to 300 in the course of a little over 18 months. That was a really great place to be at that time. And I think my skill set worked really well. At Microsoft, actually building out a local government accelerator for dynamic CRM was something that was really interesting, and how we took what was a CRM product, which is a kind of broad product category, but we really verticalized it for a specific niche market. And we built out a number of great customer wins in that space. And I actually won a gold Microsoft award as part of that, which is a pretty coveted award within the Microsoft environment. And then I guess maybe at Travelport, there in more of a senior role, building a team and bringing the right people in. I worked very closely with the then CIO, Mark Ryan, who was an ex-IBM guy. And together we sponsored a number of initiatives, one of which was bringing user experience people into the organization in order to start to work on customer journey mapping and really understanding all the elements of what the B2B travel experience was. And this was part of the work that ultimately led Travelport to becoming more of a B2B 4C and worrying about the end customer in the B2B environment we were in. And I think as part of that, we brought some great user experience people into the organization who were definitely those kind of polishing, high detail people who were able to work on, figuring out how the product needed to physically all interact with the users. And interestingly, some of the people I worked with in that environment now actually work at Spotify in a B2C environment. So I think, great examples there of kind of being aware of how this worked, but previously obviously not having labels for those kind of people. So, I think the index has a real value in terms of people that are trying to build more of this sort of strategic, game-changing kind of approach to the business. To make that land, you need a team of multiple skill sets. And I think having the ability to put labels on these things and then try and identify the right people either within your organization or outside the organization to bring in to upskill is a really critical thing that people need to do when they're building the right teams, but also then to build and give people skills opportunities within their own organizations.
Absolutely.
Well, one of the things I loved about getting the report and getting it back, there's a page in the report that talks about who you're like in terms of other people out there. And with me being a strategist first and a game changer second, I sort of am paired up with the Elon Musk, which I loved. And everybody, of course, wants to aspire to be an Elon Musk or a Steve Jobs or whatever it is. So, I mean, you have to take these things with a pinch of salt, but I loved the fact that that was there. I think, in my own mind, what it's really helped me understand is that I've always been somebody that I think people that know me and have been in a room with me, I'm pretty fast thinking. I see these opportunities, but I never really understood, why I did or how that was maybe a little different from many people that are out there. And from my understanding, the combination I have is a fairly rare combination as well. So, the way that I'm looking at this going forwards is that I want to make sure that I'm really in that kind of role where I can leverage this creative skill I have. And I know in the past, if I'm doing the same thing for too long, I definitely can get bored. And so what I think is really important to me as I either work with new clients or, part of my goal for this year is to even consider going back into a full-time role with the right employer, is to really sort of try and find an opportunity where I can use this skill to really help me and help the organization I'm working with to really sort of look for those new business models, that new way of approaching problem solving. One of the things I did last year was I took an MIT course in AI and strategy. And it was an 8-week online course, and I really enjoyed digging into a subject that I'd read about quite a bit, but not maybe gone quite as deep. And I'm hugely sort of, I've always been a technophile, technology's always helped me with my dyslexia. But I really feel that, AI is such a game-changing technology. And I think very few people in organizations truly understand the real opportunity that it represents. And so, from my own perspective, I'm doubling down on really trying to understand more about that, and would love to work in an organization or with clients who, have a need or a desire to do that. So I think that, that is definitely one of the key areas that I would love to get more involved in, and really sort of figure out, how I do more of those things. No, I mean, I think, for anybody that's thinking in their organization about, if they're looking for some kind of transformational change in the organization, or they're looking for, some kind of digital transformation, I would strongly encourage them to take a look at the index to try and identify, skills within their own organization today who may be not being leveraged to the full extent, because these sort of hidden gems may be in the organization, hitting their head against the procedures and politics that exists in business, and maybe not getting the full scope to be able to do great things. I think this could actually maybe encounter some people within the organization that they could use and leverage appropriately for some of those transformations and changes that they're doing. So yeah, I found it super useful in my own case.